and that means either we have to work with a housing association partner, or we have to become a partner ourselves. And all the guys here are going to talk about some of the different routes and some of the different experiences that are out there and are possible. So I'm going to leave the introductory remarks there. Please enjoy what you listen to here. Please ask loads of questions, either drop them in the text. We'll have a proper Q&A in the middle, I think, of the session, and if you've got any burning questions that we don't get time for today, we've only got about an hour and a quarter, you know, all the contact details will be on the documentation, and you can contact all of us directly. So please enjoy and ask questions, and I'll let you get on with it, guys.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Charles is just on the line, one of our speakers, and he's having troubles with the link to join the meeting. Lucy, would you be able to resend it possibly? Thanks very much. Okay, Charles, we're going to connect with you, so we're going to just carry on, and we've got plenty of time for you to join. Okay, I'll just do it. If you could watch out for an email from Lucy, Charles, could you do
that? So whilst some logistics are being smoothed out with Charles as a speaker, I'll just quickly lead into the first part of the session that me and Andy are going to talk about. The intention that we want to kind of give over in the next sort of 10 minutes is just very much an introductory, cursory overview of what the different delivery options are for different groups. And then later in the session, we'll be hearing more about from live community housing projects and from housing associations about the details of their scheme, why they made the decisions they did, how things have actually worked out in the real world. But I'll pass back to Andy, and he can take us there.
Okay, can everybody see the screen share now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So the purpose of the section of the evening that Josh and I are going to lead on is, as Josh has just said, to describe a few different ways of approaching delivery, looking at the issue of how to balance workload and risk and so on with efficiency. So some of these mechanisms involve becoming a registered provider, and others avoid that. So let's see. So this is what we're going to be covering. Josh and I will be looking at the business of being a registered provider and looking at self-delivery compared to partnership delivery. And then Karen from Calderdale will be talking about why they opted to become a registered provider. And Charles from Loon Valley will be talking about why they decided to work in partnership rather than being a registered provider. And then we'll be moving on to talk about, hear from Mark Dutton from South Lakes Housing about their experience in working with Loon Valley as the RP partner. And then Jim will finish up by talking about the services that Leeds Community Homes can offer. So this is obviously going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So hopefully these slides will be providing a resource for people to look at your leisure after this evening. And you'll be able to
Hello, hi, I got there.
Oh, great. Welcome, Charles.
Hello.
So what is a registered provider? Well, if you want to own and rent homes which are below market value and need public subsidy in order to be affordable, you have to become a registered provider. And the application process, it's something which, if you look at the official times, they tend to vary from reality, if you like. The first stage is reasonably quick at 15 days. The second stage can take much longer than the stated time. And I think the average is actually 18 months rather than 3 to 6 months. But it's something which a lot of community organisations have gone through successfully. And there are plenty of examples of groups that have become registered providers and self-developed. But what we want to do here is provide you with an overview so you have an insight into the choices that you can make. You don't have to do everything yourselves. We've got guides on the process. So what's the situation like? What's life like if you become a registered provider? So there's an annual fee, modest fee to do. There's a few reports to write, which involve a little bit of time. But then the other aspects are things like you're going to be subject to rent setting policy, might be specified by Homes England or the regulator, and you might be exposed to future government policy changes. But then if you're working in partnership with an RP, then your partner will be subject to those things themselves. Some groups are interested in the possibility of becoming a registered provider because you can eventually benefit from reinvestment income through the rents, but obviously that's not going to materialize until any loans have been paid back. So that's a long-term aim, really. Over to Josh.
Well, thanks, Andy. So broadly speaking, we're going to talk about what are like the three main community housing delivery options. There are variations on them, and there's a lot of kind of diversity within each of those options, how you approach it, how they actually play out. But you can separate them into three broad categories, and the groups we've got speaking on after us kind of represent different aspects of these delivery options. So the first one we'll be talking about will be self-delivery. And if you want to flick on. Sorry, prior to talking about self-delivery, one of the things that is important when we're thinking about partnership, who is it that the group is going to partner with? Like, who are these partners that want to work with community housing groups to create these projects? So part of understanding the partnership is really take a look at why do housing associations want to partner? Generally, there's, I think, always been a bit of apprehension and suspicion about how the needs and aspirations of the group can be met alongside the needs of the housing association. But actually, when you look into it, there is a lot of synergy there. Like, housing associations are organizations that are set up and established to provide housing. They're very good at doing that. They're in developing housing and managing the housing stock that they do. That's the purpose of the organization. And with a community-led housing project, they've kind of got a group rooted in a local community that's able to express sort of what that community needs and wants. And so in effect, there can be a lot of match up between what housing associations are attempting to achieve in terms of their mission, alongside kind of the groundedness and the community aspect that the group can bring. Does mean that partnerships, there's a lot of potential there for them. So rather than imagining that they're always going to be kind of an exception to something, thinking about how those two organizations can kind of work alongside each other to achieve quite effective outcomes. So thinking about self-delivery. So this is from the point of view where community-led housing group, you move the slide, Andy, is focusing on delivering the housing project itself. Effectively, the group is taking ultimately responsibility for everything. That doesn't mean they need to do every professional job and undertake all the complexities that take part of that, but they are bringing in those skills, they are managing that, they are kind of seeing that through. So there's a lot of skill and technical ability that's required internally within the group. What that provides is a group that they sort of return. The group itself retains a long-term income from a scheme. So it's something that they've entirely managed, created, and sort of retain. One big factor to put in here is that generally to access capital grants, you need to become a registered provider. So those are grants that are available for subsidizing ownership of rental homes. It typically is a key component of viability. So even when we're thinking about self-delivery characteristics and a group wanting to undertake the development of a scheme itself without working alongside any of the partners, there's still very much the likelihood that they will need to be part of a regulatory framework just to make the viability of such a thing work. Next slide, Andy. But there's many good reasons why projects have chosen self-delivery. There's fewer compromises because ultimately the group isn't having to work in partner with another organization that has its own needs. That can lead to greater autonomy in terms of the outcomes of the project. And if you're going through the registered provided status on the delivery of a successful project, it does leave that organization very well placed in terms of thinking about how it might want to develop further projects. So, it can be a chastening experience, but it's a good way to bring in. Andy, do you want to talk through some of these examples?
Yeah, so what we've got here is Calder Valley, which we'll hear more of from Karen in a second. These are all organisations that have become registered providers. Lightening Trust and Keswick Community Trust I was involved in. And one of the other things which is quite interesting to note is that with the, certainly in my experience, the timescale for actually delivering a scheme, going from being lay people who haven't done development before to having people moving into their homes. In both cases, that took about 4 years, and I think that's a pretty respectable time, actually. You know, I think some housing association schemes would very often take around about that length of time. But you've got a few projects there, all of different sizes, and Keswick now actually become quite a significant player, having developed about 50 homes so far.
Cool. So development leases, so looking more into the partnership. The workload for the group is much more limited in this arrangement. Effectively, the group defines what it's trying to achieve, what kind of development it is aiming to live in, and circulates that through a prospectus, so essentially outlining who they are, the community support they've had, the consultation they've done, and what they're looking for in a partner. Hopefully then they'll select and sort of go through various housing associations, approach some of them and maybe be approached by others. And then once they've been selected, there's things like heads of terms and lease agreements that actually manage the ongoing relationship between the group and the developer, the housing association. And these things are codified via that lease. In this model, effectively, the housing association funds and manages the pre-development and development of the homes and retains the long-term sort of financial interest in them. So the housing association essentially retains overall ownership of the scheme, but through the terms that have been negotiated in the lease and the head of terms, that sets out what the responsibility of the community is within that. And generally that will extend to things like allocations, management, potentially some income on the basis of doing those kind of things. To make these kind of arrangement work, it's very much predicated on goodwill and compromise. It requires a group to find a housing association where there is this fit between aims and goals, and for the housing association to be kind of interested in supplying a project to that group. There's many good reasons to consider development leases. They're very realistic, much more realistic in terms of capacity for a community-led housing group to achieve via self-delivery, whilst not necessarily having to compromise on the aim of the project. It's certainly less complex and risky. A lot of the significant risks are being held by the housing association partner, who are the organisation who have a track record of developing housing. And you can skip the need to be a registered provider, which is an important step. Andy?
Okay, just a few examples. Down in the southwest of England, this has really taken off significantly. So there's been a large number of developments done with housing associations in that way. In Cumbria, we've got one particular scheme, small scheme in Langdale. And in the Lancaster area, we're very pleased to have Charles and the Loon Valley CLT scheme supported by South Lakes Housing, Market South Lakes Housing. So some great examples there.
And finally, the kind of consortium model. So again, working with the partner. In this one, the development is still handled by a housing association, but at the end of it, there's the ability, the housing association passes the ownership of the properties over to the community-led housing group. So the housing association in that instance is very much been contracted to like fund and build the scheme and then pass it over to the group at cost. So they don't retain that long-term financial interest in there. This is a really good model for a community-led housing group that wants to own and manage its houses without having to take on the complexity of development. It still requires needing to become a registered provider to take ownership of the properties afterwards, but it's a much more kind of discrete and fixed relationship between the housing association partner and the group. Andy's got some examples.
We've got one example here, which is the Ouch scheme, which you may have heard about. It's been written up in the press a little bit. It took a while to get there, but the housing association played the lead role, and the community that's resulted, they're very pleased with the end result. And this is just to finish off Josh and I's bit. It's just another way of doing things. This is something which I know that Jim here at Leeds Community Homes will be able to talk about what LCH is doing similar to this. But here's an example of a cord housing association in the Midlands, which leads on in terms of assembling land, building the homes, but then is very progressive in involving the community that's going to actually live in the homes, in the design of the homes, and then helps them with training so that they can actually move in and live as a community, a cooperative community. I think there's another interesting variation on theme, really. But now we're going over to Karen. Welcome.
Yes.
Thank
Hello.
you, Karen.
It's all right. Hello. Hello. We're a small community land trust, Happy Valley land, if anybody knows Happy Valley, which sadly isn't very happy. And there is a third series coming along on the television, but that's sort of claim to fame at the moment. Next slide. We're a slightly interesting organisation. Can we have the next slide? Okay, right. Because we are not just a community land trust, we're also a community benefit society, we're an exempt charity, and we're a registered provider. And here's a photo of when we invited the local community to come and see our first development, and this was in February 2020. And it did take, as Andy or Josh said, quite a long time to get there. But it is ours. It is ours. We were the developer. We raised the funds. We appointed the architect. We are the landlords, and we get the rent. We also pay off the loans and etc. So that's the downside. Anyway, next slide. Okay. Right. So we became an RP. We chose to become an RP. And it's interesting what you said about how long it takes. So there we are. We did a pre-application, which was approved in autumn 2017. And yes, it didn't take all that long, but that's because you don't actually provide lots of information. It then took us till January 2018 to do a full submission. We then had to do lots more information to the regulator. That was, as you can see, March 2018. We then sort of went round more, more replies, more etc. And so we were approved in June 2018. So there you are, from full application to becoming an RP. That took 6 months, but it did take several months before that. The prize for us was the £60,000 from Homes England. So those bungalows that I showed you took us it took another 60,000 from Homes England to make it worthwhile. Now then, one of the things that you may worry about is the expertise that's needed to actually do all of these forms and the the help that you might need. We were very lucky. We got a big potential grant quite early on in 2017. And that grant was what we called investment readiness. So it meant that it just helped us to develop internally as an organisation. But most of that money, which was £34,000, we paid to somebody who actually helped us take us through this process, do lots of the application processes, etc. And I don't think there is now that facility for getting grants to help you, but I don't know. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide.
Trying to move it.
Okay. Struggling, are you?
Oh, it seems to have frozen. I'll just come out to the share for a minute.
Okay, right. Well, I've got one on a laptop, so while you're sorting that out, I'll keep on speaking. So a question will be, why on earth did we do this? You know, it was a long process. It actually could be quite costly, because until last October, we were entirely trustee run. We had between 10 and 12 trustees, and we didn't have any paid staff at all. So we employed consultants to help us. So, you know, given that it was quite a painful process, why did we do it? Well, we actually did want to keep the ownership of our homes, and we did want a Homes England grant. You know, that made the finances stack up. We also had in mind for a future development, and you said that developments can take, you know, many years. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I was at a meeting today with architects for another development, which we call the High Street development. And I noticed that somebody from Calderdale Council is actually here at this meeting. And we started planning for the High Street development in about 2016. So if it comes to fruition, it's been around planning once already, it'll have taken us probably about 8 or 9 years to get that development lined up. So, you know, so you can see the development is quite a tricky process. So you know, we learned a lot, not just by going through the process of being you know, applying and going through all the process, but by God, we learned a lot by doing that first development. And you know, it's changed slightly how we're thinking of moving to the next step. Anyway, so the next slide, please. Okay. Yes, right. So this is a bit more on what is the process. So there we are, a 67-page application, which thank you, somebody filled in mostly for us. We had multiple iterations. We also had to do loads and loads of work to support that. So business plans, policies. So I came in as the treasurer in late 2017, and I spent the first 3 months, remember, as a trustee, making sure that all of our financial policies and procedures were in place, because that seemed to be one of the real issues that they were focusing on, was finance and governance. And you know, we just had to send them loads and loads of information. But in a lot of ways, all that we were doing, the business plan, the policies, etc., was only what we should have been doing anyway, as good governance for the type of organisation that we're hoping to be. Next slide. Okay. And I actually said this to Andy when I was chatting about doing this presentation, and he said, well, most of the other pathways, you know, will allow you to open doors. But we were really quite surprised. This was an unintended benefit. As soon as we became the RP, then people started to take us more seriously. We do have a very good relationship, and I'm not just saying this for the colleague from Calderdale Council, but we do have a very good relationship with the local authority, and they gave us the land for the development that you just saw, and for the development that we're trying to finish off, putting into place, move into planning, hopefully in a month's time. So I think working with your local authority, if you can, you know, no matter what sort of an organisation you are, helps you. Next slide. Right, now then, so here you are, goody, you've become an RP, you're able to get money from Homes England, you can be your own landlord, you can own homes, but that it doesn't finish having gone through that process. You have to meet regulators' ongoing requirements. Now then, I actually are very positive about this. I think this is my finance background. but I think it gives you a very good framework for you to work in. It's about good governance and it's about good financial viability. And also it's about standards. So it's setting a framework for you, it's setting the bar for you. So there's lots of quality standards, and those are only things that you should do anyway, you know, making sure that your houses are fit to live in, that when you let your houses, you are doing it according to, you know, sort of a good processes. So, you know, and you are a good landlord. So there's lots of stuff in there that you know, helping your community and your neighborhood. You know, you're making sure that everything, you know, all the estate or the development is a, you know, a happy and well run place. So there's nothing there that you shouldn't be doing anyway. The governance and financial viability standard is essentially making sure that you are running a tight ship, that, you know, you're providing value for money, and you have to show that in a value for money matrix of calculations. But you have to be running your organisation in such a way that you are not putting your social housing assets at risk. And I don't think there's anything that we could argue about that. There's also, and I think Jim had it on his first slide, or one of you had it on your first slide, about data requirements. You do have to do an annual return, so that you know, the regulator knows how many houses there are around. And also, if you are disposing of assets, you have to notify them as well.
Any last points you'd like to make, Karen, before we move on?
Yes, and there are obviously audits, but as I say, mostly it's just good governance. Right, next slide, which I think might be my last one. Yes, so we actually do work with other RPs, and the thing that we learned in the first development was that actually, you know, we need cash flow was a real killer. So we're actually going to work with a housing association, like-minded, to do our next development. And then we are going to take our 10 units, they will have their 10 units, and we'll all be really happy. Same organisation that helps us run our houses. That's it. End of story.
That's fantastic, Karen. Thanks ever so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, I think we're on to Charles. There's the contact for Karen and Calder Valley CLT. Yeah. And here we go. Thanks very much for coming along, Charles. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. I'm talking about the scheme that we have in Holton, just near Lancaster. Where we're developing in partnership with South Lakes Housing Association, who you're going to hear from after me anyway. I've got a couple of, I'm mainly talking about the partnership model and why we chose it. But there's a couple of slides to give you the sort of the context first. You can go to the next one, Andy. This is just a summary. Basically, we're building 20 affordable homes developed by the CLT, partnership with South Lakes Housing, but very strongly supported by the Lancaster City Council. Just our energy and our vision for the group very much focused on the three left-hand columns here, which is where our commitment was coming from. First, the idea of getting priority access for local people and houses available in perpetuity, no right to buy. Secondly, a very big issue on high quality, good space standards, very low energy use for avoiding fuel poverty, low CO2, and the idea of community focused design. So a lot of our goals were focused around improving the quality of affordable housing, as well as, and persuading people of that, as well as actually just building it. Go on to the next one.
Playing up again. I'm just going to have to stop sharing.
Okay, I'll keep. I mean, basically, on the quality stuff, the very high energy standards, the passive house standard, essentially gives you. Where are we? You're on the next. You're on another one. I think. That's the one. That's the next one. Next one now. Just to sum it up, it's sort of people, planet, and provider. The reason, can you go back one, please, Andy? The reason, the very high energy quality means that we can avoid fuel poverty for the people. The passive house standard is very good for health. It's very low moisture. It's very nice to live in. The planet benefits from the low CO2 and helps us combat climate global warming. But the provider also has happy families who stay a long time. Hastow Association have been well known for saying that the only site where they have no rent arrears is one where they have driven to passive house standards, and therefore people aren't suffering from fuel poverty. So let's go on to the partnership one. And I apologize for the smallness of the slide. I should have thought of that when it came to zooming, but I'll read it. We thought the basic choices we had were pretty much the same as was introduced at the beginning. Do it all ourselves, including the mortgage loan and grant funding, and hire services in if we need to help organize and build it and manage it, or fund it ourselves, but hire in lots of delivery expertise for everything else, if you like. And thirdly, actually go the whole hog and ask the partner that we found to provide the funding as well, and then take on the risk and organization of design, build, and then long-term manage. Fundamentally, the reason we chose the third one and the development lease was our committee, our trustees, and our group, and the energy from it came out of our experience of about 8 or 9 years ago now, developing another community housing group, Lancaster Cohousing, which is about 40 houses all built to passive house standards with about 65 people living in them. That experience gave us the confidence that we could turn an idea into reality, but it also gave us an awful lot of scars of the very extensive commitment and process necessary to actually do it ourselves, because we literally did pretty well all of it ourselves in that case. And so we had a very strong energy for wanting to improve standards and get really high quality stuff built, but we felt we'd be very happy to work with somebody else to do it, and we thought that they would have lower cost of capital and find it easy, and a larger asset base to borrow from, to make it easier for them to raise the money and get the maximum out of Homes England. And the fourth, the last point there was fundamentally we also we know that lots of CLTs on their own doing it all themselves are going to find it difficult to scale up across the country. And so we wanted this in a way to be a demo project where we could help show how a reputable housing association and work with them to show that this can be a conventional kind of scalable up process of designing to this standard and working with community organizations. And that was quite a big motivator as well. But of course, every CLT's choice will depend upon their own context and their own energy and commitment and their own circumstances. Carry on. So the delivery is fundamentally the partnership is that the CLT owns the freehold land and has a 150-year legal development lease with South Lakes Housing to fund, develop, and manage it. As usual, we have a mixed team on design and construction. South Lakes Housing and Loon Valley CLT are in the team. We have architects, John Gilbert Associates, Elliott and Co, RG Perkins as engineers, Tyson Construction from Blackpool are building it. Our program we got planning permission in 2020. We're expecting to be on site in late summer, autumn 2022 this year. We actually started in 2018. So again, we'll be an example of the kind of overall 4-year process that Andy talked about. And the funding has come from, it was absolutely vital to get early funding from Lancaster City Council, from their community-led housing funds. They basically have bought the land and paid for substantial pre-development costs. And South Lakes Housing then are funding the construction with their own resources and with a substantial Homes England grant. Carry on. The key lessons we learned from the partnership were clearly it's really important to find the right partner. And we were lucky to find possibly lucky to find South Lakes Housing among many others. We found that SLH wanted to move in our direction geographically into our area, and significantly they wanted to go green. They wanted a more environmental and a higher quality build. And so in effect, we came along and offered them a project that would allow them to do both of those things. We felt it was very important that the partner should already want to go where we wanted to go and not just say yes because they wanted a project. That was a really important part. The other key thing we did was we worked early together. We went, having had an email exchange of agreement and an exclusivity agreement, which was quite quick and had some heads of terms in it. We then went straight to work together on developing the pre-planning work up to planning permission. We didn't wait to get the lease signed first. And the lease actually was almost the last thing, signing the lease was almost exactly the last thing we did. It coincided with literally almost in 1 week, buying the land and signing the contract with the contractor. And agreeing the difficult bits of the lease, particularly about what goes wrong, what happens if things go wrong, was one of the biggest tests of the relationship. But we built up a very good relationship at the beginning through working together, and that allowed us to navigate the difficult bits of agreeing the lease. The lease gives us quite a lot of continued influence and control on key things about quality and community-led involvement and local priority. But crucially, it also is written in such a way that South Lakes Housing have tested it against their lenders and know that they can borrow against it as a lendable asset. And that's absolutely critical. So we've managed to combine those two really important aspects of it in the lease. Finally, the other benefit was, and lesson was, that because of the local agreement and interest in our local publicity through the parish magazine, a series of meetings and regular newsletters, we had a successful public consultation process online, actually, because of COVID, before we went for planning permission, and we had no objections to the planning permission on the site from local people. And by the time we are now, we've already had something like 40 applications which we've passed on to LCC and to SLH to be occupiers before we finish building it. So it's been a very good way of publicizing the site and getting people lined up who really want to live in it. Last slide. So our key features have been our design to minimize fuel poverty and reduce energy, our design for community. We really wanted this to be not to be a suburb, and it's the layout, which I'd forgotten to mention, is that we have the parking around the edges, and we have a community access street down the middle, where hopefully people will meet each other and talk to each other and have some shared space. And finally, the collaboration and partner to deliver this method suited our circumstances and our trustees and groups' energy and our experience. But of course, each group has got to do it in a way that suits their own circumstances. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Charles. So we've now got an opportunity to field some questions. Lucy, would you be able to pick out, are there some questions in the chat?
Let me have a look. I'm just going to unshare your screen, Andy, so we can see. Okay. I think Jim's been answering some by the look. Oh, that's a very long one. Might be easier if the person who said it says it out. This one's from Karen. Do you want to just say what your question is? It's really long.
No, it wasn't. Well, it wasn't a question. It was an answer. It was about Neil's question, and his question was, what's in it for the partners? And I was explaining what our relationship was with the partner that we're moving to develop our next development with, and I explained that they're going to cash flow the development because they've got big pockets and cash flow can be a killer. And what we have, and they also have development expertise. What we have was all of the, we funded, grants funded all the pre-development costs. We own the land. We have done all the work, on the design. We've worked with the architects. We've worked with the community, etc., etc. We've worked with the council and so on. So they acknowledge that they couldn't have done this development without us. So they've come in late in the day. But it is an answer to Neil's question as to why would a large developer RP want to move in, you know, with a small developer and you know, almost be we're the parasites and using them.
Can I pick up on Neil's other question? He's asking about what's in it for housing associations that are being asked to consider a consortium approach. From what I can gather, it seems as if housing associations, like any organisation, they do vary in what they want to get involved with, and also they go through phases of organisations. So there are some which I've come across in London who have actually approached this in a very altruistic way, where they had community projects which they just wanted to help, basically, and there wasn't a lot in it for the housing association in terms of finance or control and so on. They just wanted to facilitate and help anybody who was trying to deliver affordable housing. So I think it's just down to talking to your local housing associations. If you develop a preference for a development model, one of the things that the models we've been looking at, and then just test reactions with the local housing associations, and they might be willing to adopt the one that you're interested in most, or they might be more comfortable with another model. So that has to come out of discussion, I suppose.
Question for Charles.
Yeah.
What is the ongoing relationship with the housing association?
Yes, the lease provides for our ongoing influence and input into decisions made by South Lakes. The lease requires no right to buy in perpetuity. It allows us to inspect and see information about the selection of tenants and the continuing priority for local people. It allows us to look at continuing maintaining the high energy standards that have been set and make sure that's going on. And we envisage that it will be done through regular exchange of information and probably some form of annual review. So we go on having a role in watching what's going on and have the ability to put information into how the housing association is running the project. And the lease commits the housing association to going on doing that.
Fantastic. Should we have a go at going over to Mark from South Lakes Housing? Lucy, are you able to get Mark's presentation up and running? And then we'll have more questions we've got Mark,
I don't know.
and then Jim, and then we'll have more questions.
Thanks, Andy. I think I can do it. Lucy, keep me right.
Yeah, you should be able to just share your screen, Mark. Sorry, that made me panic then.
Is that working? Hang on. Oh, hang on. Is that working? Share. Oh, share. Sorry. Bear with me, everyone. Sorry, we're teams in our office.
That's it. Great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me to come along. I'm Mark from South Lakes Housing. I did say to Andy, this presentation was too big to email. I think it's the photographs and there's a few in there, but I did say I would whistle stop through it really fast and rapid. And I'll try and not duplicate Charles because I thought he set it out much better than I could. But I suppose I can give it slightly from the other side of the coin, the other side of the fence, whatever, from the RP side. So if I can just, so is that on slideshow, Lucy?
Yeah, you can make it bigger, can't you, if you go to a full slideshow?
Yeah, hang on.
Yeah.
I can do it from the bottom, can't I? Just there.
Yeah, it's
okay. So so I'll just quickly whip through. So just a couple of things about us. So we're based in Kendal, primarily in South Lakeland, but also more recently across in Cumbria. We've just finished a development, the top right there, that's a CGI of a development in Walney Island that we finished recently, and we've moved further south into Lancaster as well. South Lakes emerged from what's called, people will know, ALMOs, arm's length organisations, some time ago, and was formally established independently about 10 years ago this year. First few years delivering the investment sort of side of things that we needed to do and catch up works. And then this period has been about moving the business forward. I have to put these slides up when I'm speaking to groups, but that just means we're more than about housing. We're looking at communities and trying to support the environment and people who live in our homes, and have taken a wider view. This is more specifically relevant. So our current 5-year business strategy had us focusing on growth, so developing more units, and also increasing our spatial reach, if you like, of our operations. So moving out of South Lakeland to the south into Lancaster, and possibly to the west and to the north as well. So we've been doing that, particularly greening, as I think others have mentioned, but that was really important. So we were kind of, there was that, we were in step with Loom Valley when the conversations began and developed around that. And we're also looking to digitize the business as are others. So in terms of our growth stuff, that's gone reasonably well. So we developed 37 new homes last year, 88 forecast for this year. We've got 48 of our own led developments, not other acquisitions, on site currently, 20 of which are the houses at Loom Valley that we're doing with Charles and his group, and we're delighted with that. Longer term, for this 5-year plan, we now have a populated pipeline that's around where we wanted to get to, and we're sort of halfway through, so it's not a bad position, we think. This is an old slide from an old presentation, but it just kind of puts our mindset when we were just meeting Loom Valley. So maybe a couple of years ago, we were looking at our whole business in terms of its carbon usage and its environmental impact. So not just new development, we were looking at our fleet, all the vans flying around, things around construction, modern methods, timber frame, volumetric, all of that sort of stuff, and the end of gas coming along rapidly in a couple of years' time, etc., etc. So we have a big conversation ongoing around that, and this was just an example of something that's not passive house that was happening at the same sort of time. So that's a site in Kendal, site for Sore Eyes, that we own, unfortunately. It was a lot of ASB. It's near the north-south railway line, and to the right there's a big power cable over the top. Would we ever get planning? Probably not, was the advice, but we thought we could give it a go in terms of us looking to do some development that was a little bit green. It was a small site that we owned, so we didn't have to buy the land. And if you just keep your eye on the post box, I think, on this one. So that was about a year later. We've nearly got planning now. We've gone through all the network rail and the upset all the old garage owners, but the neighbours were happy behind. And it's like that now. We finished that off last March, and then it's only 5 homes. So it was a small development for us, but they're all pretty nice. Hopefully 2 of them are for shared ownership. They've gone really well, and 3 for affordable rent. And just in terms of the eco performance, they were the highest ratings, in terms of their EPC and their energy use, so on and so forth. So this is going alongside the whilst we were getting to know Loom Valley, and that's why we're here tonight. But just to give the context for the business, we were looking to grow and we were looking to do things that were green. So when Charles and his group came along, it was great because we said to them up front, we don't know anything about passive house really, but what we do know is about development, and we've got a program and we have resources in place to do that, and we'd quite like to move down the road into the Lancaster area as well. So I wonder whether we could do something. So there's Halton. There's our site, actually, that sort of scrub land in the middle there. And really, I guess this is the meat of it from our perspective. So I think Josh got it really right at the top when he was saying it's that organizational fit and values synergy that we felt there was. We're not for profit. Okay, there's lots of money involved, but we don't have shareholders, and we do have that social purpose and that environmental mission. We didn't have passive house experience, but Loom Valley did. As Charles was saying, they had a fantastic story to tell about the development of the previous passive house scheme, which we'd seen and were really excited with. We wanted to learn, and it seemed to be an opportunity to forge a really productive learning partnership for us, as well as developing, the much needed affordable home. So we thought there could be the potential for that mutual benefit in a win-win scenario. So that's me with my optimistic head on, but this is welcome to my real world. So it's a leasehold model. So we're not owning the land. What's that about? We have to do some consultation and involve people who aren't our tenants, aren't our board members, and consult with an agent who isn't our regulator. What is that about? What about the technicalities around the lease model? Can we get mortgage finance? We want to do some shared ownership. Some of these homes are going to be sold to low-cost homeowners, local people there who maybe can't afford to buy outright. They want to buy one of these great homes. Does the lease prevent them accessing finance in the market? There was some noise and challenge around that. Moreover, can we as a business use the stock and the equity there to charge the properties to borrow for future development? That was a big sticking point, Charles. I'm sure we had weeks and months on that, didn't we? Yep. And so these are the conversations, and I was very upfront and open with Charles about these were the conversations I was having to field at board as we were developing the project through its development. And what I always would say is I think there was another side of the arrangement. If we could move through those potential issues, and I think they are just potential issues and they're solvable. We had an established CLT partner that had a real clear objective and vision and purpose. We really liked that and warmed to that. There was a very supportive local authority behind them. I think that's critical to the success of the project, both philosophically. Lancaster has that green champion agenda, but also it was putting its commuted housing sums, money it was taken from private developers and putting its sort of money where its mouth was into schemes like this. And that could de-risk it for us in the sense that it was great because there was some underwriting of pre-development costs, all the work that our team has to do around design and project planning way upstream. And if it was going to be for something that we weren't ultimately owning outright as a freeholder, then that's very much a story I wanted to tell the board. It's a win-win. We're doing some learning here and we're getting access to a site that's ready for development. And guess what? The organisation who we're working with can help us fund some of our staff costs and all of that feasibility work. So I think, that's a great story. And that was why I think we could eventually swing behind it and speak to Homes England and start to get the scheme moving. But I think that slide and that slide were really the sort of numbers that gist for 18 months. I'm sure Charles would agree. And we had that conversation for a long time. But we eventually got through it, and not to repeat what Charles has said, but we met, I think, late 18, early 2019, and just moving along from left to right pretty quickly, we got into that partnership. We did an open book joint recruitment of architects. We weren't passive house experts. We needed some experts around that, and we looked externally for that and got John Gilberts from Scotland, who I think Loon Valley and Charles and ourselves are delighted to have worked with. We got into the design and then pre-planning consultations. I remember when I was just doing this, remember, Charles, that event we had a day, and Andy, you helped us with it in February 2020 in Halton, people coming in and into an event and putting post-its on maps and plans on the wall. It seems a bit anathema and ancient history now, doesn't it? But we didn't know what was going to happen.
One of the interesting things about that, Mark, was being able to bring some of the trustees from Keswick down to talk to members of the public, wasn't it?
It was excellent, yeah. But I think then we all know what happened next, the next month after that. But it was brilliant, and as Charles said, I thought this might be derailed, and I remember the board thought, oh, this is the end of the world. We're not going to get anything through planning. What's going to happen? The sites were all shut. But we continued. We used media, mobile phones, videos, virtual presence to do the pre-con around the planning and got the application in. I think, Charles will keep me right, maybe only a month or 6 weeks beyond our original project plan, pre-COVID.
Yeah, we didn't lose much time,
Yeah. So that moved on. That was made. And then last year, we had been speaking to Homes England throughout the development of the project. We had all of those protracted debates around the lease and what it means and what if things went wrong and all the rest of it. But eventually we needed to get on site for funding by the end of March, and we managed it, started on site. We're in that deep into the construction period now, and we're hoping, I've been conservative there, Charles, I'm thinking the summer or late summer, so I've said September, October, but certainly this year, those homes should be ready for a new community to move in. So there's our site again, and again from a different angle, you can see the River Loon there and the M6 in the background. This is us on site in the autumn. Just looking, and you can see the base plates for the houses are there, and the site's just coming together. A little bit later on, the frames are in, and again, it's a bit mucky and everything, but we're getting there. And in terms of this, hopefully, if we were doing this again in a few months, that won't be a CGI, that'll be an actual photograph. So it's going to be 20 units for rent and for shared ownership, mixed tenure for local people. And as Charles said, I think it's created its own demand. Charles, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of learning. It's going to be passive house in terms of space standards. They're bigger than NDSS. For those who know, space standards, nationally described space standards, which is decent in itself, but we wanted it to be bigger than that. So they're going to be decent homes for people to live in, promote affordable warmth, promote a sense of community. And our development and design teams have got some passive house nous about it now as well. So it's kind of been win-win all round, and we're not phased by the long-term relationship with Loon Valley. We're delighted with that. And after all, I think go back to the start, as Josh was saying, at the end of the day, we do share that vision and that sort of social purpose and that mission. So I won't waffle on anymore and repeat anything that Charles has said, but that was basically it from our perspective. Hope that was useful.
Very useful. Very much appreciate that, Mark. Really great. Also a really nice layout with the car-free area between the two rows of houses.
What isn't so great is my trying to stop sharing the screen. Has that done, Lucy? Have I stopped sharing?
I did it. I've done it for you.
Oh, fantastic. You're a star.
I'm really sorry I've got to leave. It's been fantastic, and I'll catch the rest up from the recording. But thank you so much for all your work, everybody.
Thanks, Susan. So over to Jim Reed now, one of the directors of Leeds Community Homes, just to give you a run through about where we are as an organisation and the services that Jim is able to offer.
Thanks, Sandy, and it's I just say it's been really interesting listening to the contributions so far. Listening to what an RP that's got the right kind of heart for partnering up can do, and what the experiences of organisations going through this process. Leeds Community Homes. I'll be fairly brief, I think, and I'm not going to speak to a slideshow, so I'm just going to waffle a little bit. But we started about 5 years ago, a little bit of a kind of an offshoot from the Lilac project, which was a fairly well-known community housing project in Leeds that I was involved with as project manager. And part of the real ethos of Leeds Community Homes was to enable more community-led housing, and we recognised right from the start, and a lot of the personnel has changed and a lot of water under the bridge, but right at the start we realised there was going to be lots of different routes for doing that, and we knew that some of those would be groups that wanted to do their own thing, some would be groups that needed essentially a development service of some sort, and some community housing would be built directly by ourselves, and we always had that intention right from the start to do that. Time's gone on. We were successful at raising some shares towards our own program, but a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years has been really focused on that support for groups, and we've built that up, and that continues with as we go on, and picks up some of the stuff we've been talking about today. But we've always kept that idea of being a provider of homes, and as we've seen, this move particularly towards groups looking at registering, it's trying very much with the position that we're in, and so we took a decision a couple of years ago that we would go down the path of registering as a provider of social housing. And that was twofold. One, to create our own housing, the housing we would be landlord of directly, but also with an intention that we could be the registered provider of choice for groups, community-led groups and organisations within our car area, which is Yorkshire generally, to partner with. And that comes from a couple of different places, and a lot of experience that we've had working with groups going through this process. And I think one of the issues that groups have is finding the right partner. And with respect to registered providers, they aren't all the same. And I think we can start with the advantage as Leeds Community Homes, being a partner, knowing our heart is with the idea of community-led housing. We're member-led organisation. We are a community-led organisation ourselves, and we don't need to have to be kind of convinced that doing community-led housing is a good idea, because that's what we're already doing. And we've experienced, when we've been working as kind of an interim with groups, that sometimes there is a disconnect between the group and the housing association, and sometimes you do feel that maybe there is a little bit of the message isn't quite the same, or the end product isn't quite what we expected it to be. And I hope that that's one of the things that we can help with as a deliverer and as a partner of groups. I think what we're going through that process at the moment of registering. It's been quite long-winded for us. We had to do a complete structural change in order to basically set ourselves up to be an RP, and that's something that groups who do want to change need to be aware of, that sometimes even your whole legal structure might not be suitable. We went through all that last year, got our members support to change, and we became a charitable CBS, and as a community benefit society, and we've got through the first stage, and we've been going through the whole process of getting all of our policies and everything that Karen's talking about up to scratch, and particularly all of our financial and governance processes into play. And I completely echo what Karen was saying, is that these are the things that, as an organisation that's going to manage affordable housing, you need to have. It's what you need to have anyway. And so that was part of the decision process for us. Was we knew it was going to be hard work, but we knew we needed to go through that exercise anyway. But I still sympathise with the process, because it is hard. Our detailed application goes in this week, and we're looking forward to getting out the other side of that. As well as being that potential provider for groups, and we are talking to a couple at the moment, we still maintain that support for groups, and that's, again, the point is, the important thing for us is the groups get the partner they need and follow the path that they need to be able to make the housing work, and that may be us or it may be another. And so we can offer advocacy, we can offer support, and being the intermediary between a group and another housing association, if that housing association is a better fit. We're also helping a number of organisations with the process of registering as well. So as I say, I think I don't want to waffle on forever about what the possible things that we can do for groups are. I think today's been more about learning about what the opportunities are and what the issues are around accessing grants. We'd be delighted to talk to any groups, any individuals, any organisations. If you're looking at this situation, looking at trying to access grant, looking at trying to talk to Homes England, we'd be delighted to talk to you, whether as a potential partner or whether as an advisor, and hope that we can get you into a position where we can create more affordable community-led homes. I hope that's been great and interesting. I don't know whether we've got time for any more questions, Andy and Josh.
We should have, because
Great.
we've planned to run till an hour and a quarter, so it looks like we've got 10 minutes for questions. If anybody would like to raise a hand at all, or shout out.
I had a comment. I had a comment to add, Andy, if it's helpful.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that coming out of the difficult development lease discussions with Mark and South Lakes, one of the issues that arises is if one of the partners should fail, the lease, obviously the lenders require that they can quickly find someone to buy up the asset, if you like, and make sure they go on getting their money. And one of the difficulties there is that how can you guarantee that an RP with the same values and the same interest will be available if you like to do so? And so we concluded that one of the very valuable things that hubs could do was to be an RP and effectively to be a buyer of last resort, in the case of that kind of thing happening. So I just wanted to mention, I think that's a really valuable role that the hubs could play. Partly to give security to the whole process in case an individual partnership goes wrong.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think
John.
Neil,
And Andy, can I, John Queening here, Andy, could I make a couple of points?
Please.
Yeah, I'd like to, I'd just like to say from our point of view as eco homes, we came into this not only looking at trying to develop affordable housing, but also low energy, passive house type housing. And on the partnership issue, we looked at this quite closely, and we started off on the basis that we wanted to basically do it ourselves. And we came to realize there was a lot of work in becoming an RP. And what we then turned our attention to was looking for a partner. And we did quite a lot of work in terms of looking around the web for housing associations. We looked at about 15, we long listed about 8, and we interviewed about 4, and we finally chose one who went. And we were looking for somebody who was green in the sense of looking at. And what we found, one of the comments is that from our point of view, was that there are very few green housing associations. A lot of them are paying lip service to it, and particularly the bigger ones. It's a big issue about trying to make your houses efficient. That's the thing. So we found a partner who was a middle order type of organisation who we went with. But one of the things we found with them, which was quite interesting, was that they didn't want to do one development. They wanted to do several. They actually saw the benefits would be actually through developing several, and you learn from. They'd actually done a passive house scheme in Leeds, in fact, and it didn't go particularly well for them. And they were very convinced that they needed to build a team, and they were looking for somebody who would do more than one. And they also thought that your build team, your contractor, your design, your architect would also learn from that experience, because unlike everybody knows what affordable housing is, but very few people really have got a lot of experience of low energy, green type housing. So there's a lot of learning being done in that area. So in looking for a partner, if you're looking for how homes fit for the future, which I think to us, with our climate change background, was very important, not just to build affordable, but also we wanted to find a partner who could work. So we felt that was where the effort needs to put in. Unfortunately, we think we found somebody. But it does mean that we are looking at more than one development. We will have to get the benefits of it later. And the second thing I want to just really say about the passive house is that I'm interested from what Charles. One of the learning experiences on passive house is that it's been a lot of passive house and low energy has been provided for people who are essentially middle class in that sort of sense. They know how to live and they know what to expect. Social housing, which is passive house, is different. It's a different way of living. And one of the experiences was of people building and living that type of housing is that there needs to be a lot of learning about how to live in a low energy house. Examples were that people were living in them, if you like, from a council house point of view, and they were like a tropical greenhouse, i.e. they were not making the savings, they were just living at a very high temperature. And the normal thing in a house is if it gets too hot inside, you open the windows. You don't do that in a passive house. You actually keep it and you use the ventilation system to actually control the temperature and the climate. It's a different way of living, and not everybody was used to that. So there was quite a lot of experience. And one of the things that they wanted to promote with us and find out what experience we had was in the area of, I think it was called like post-occupancy living, a learning experience of how to effectively manage living in the social housing, passive housing. So that was quite important to us. So the partnership was a key area that we wanted to make sure we got right. And we're at the place where we're just about to start a planning application. And so we decided that we would, with our partnership, would actually take it right the way through to planning to give ourselves the control, but we wanted and define what we wanted, and then hand over to the housing association we were in between, I think, where Charles is and where Calder Valley is, in the sense we didn't want the RP responsibility, but we did want to ensure that the houses that we were wanted to provide were of a specification of a type that we wanted, and this was our way of trying to do that. Then, just carrying on with the scheme right the way through to the planning commission stage and getting that agreed.
Very good. Thanks very much, John. Any more questions in people's minds at all?
Just a general thing. Hi, everyone. It's Ursula here from Shangri-Leeds. Jim knows us very well. We're one of the groups that he's talked about supporting for a while, and he's been very patient in keeping up with us. It would be helpful for us because we are very small and none of us have got realistically have got the time to devote to the development work in the way that we'd like. Are we going to get like a list of people who came on this call so that we can keep in touch with people after the meeting? Just so, for example, John just now mentioned his experience. I'd be quite interested in talking to him off the call just because we haven't got time to cover it all today. Can we get this somehow, Lucy?
That might be difficult with GDPR. I can't really give out everyone's email addresses, but if there's someone specific that you need their email address, maybe ask them to write it in the chat and copy it from there. Or if you want
you guys as a conduit or something.
Yeah. If you drop me an email and I can do a personal introduction, but I can't give out a list of everyone's emails, unfortunately.
Maybe anybody who does want to actually stay in touch with each other, you could send a message to Lucy to let her know you want to share your contact details.
Yeah, I'll drop my email in the chat, but you probably got it anyway.
Yeah, I do.
Josh, Heather, a question. Do you want to tell us what the question is, Josh?
Josh gone.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
It's Josh. I think it's another Josh.
Yeah.
He says his mic is off. Sorry. You want to write it in the chat, Josh?
I can read the question. It's a question for either myself or Charles. Yeah. What would you say was the most important first steps to starting up a land trust group and getting people together? Very exciting ideas here, but seems so daunting. I wasn't around when the Community Land Trust was set up, but it was certainly a desire to tackle some of the housing problems in the Calder Valley, to, as everybody's saying, and to provide good quality, sort of affordable housing. But that's as far as I can go. I can't sort of tell you much more than that. Charles might be
Thanks,
better.
Karen.
Our inspiration and sort of driver was an element of rage, actually, to some extent, where we saw that there were a couple of really big housing developments on the site, and the affordable housing within them provided by the conventional developers was about half as much as they originally promised for all sorts of notionally valid reasons about cost, and the standard wasn't very good. And we had one or two engagements with the developers to see if we could persuade them to do better, and didn't get anywhere. So we decided we better do it ourselves and show what could be done. That was our sort of inspiration. We started off with a steering committee. As I said, we were lucky that we had a number of core people who had been involved in, and I wasn't involved in this bigger development of Lancaster cohousing. And it was because I think some of our confidence that we could do this came from those people's experience, if you like. One of the things that we found around Lancaster, I think, is that looking at other groups, is that there are many of the communities that would most need to wish to do this are so stretched in just living their normal lives, because life is so hard, that they don't have time and they don't have energy or confidence to actually get together and think they can do something. So the other thing that we've been debating about the role of hubs is the idea that if you have a group which has a core of idea and a wish to do something, maybe hubs can not provide people not just to actually be consultants, but actually to be hands-on, actively working within groups at an early stage, to help pass on the knowledge and the experience and give the confidence a group that to nurture and mentor the group, if you like, out of its very early stages. So I think that's as being actually more than a hands-on, a doer, an action taker, if you like, as well as an advisor.
Yeah, there are 2 points I would like to make connected with that question, and one is that when times are good, we've had funding from the government to actually do really intensive training for new groups, and we've been able to do that online. Which raises the technical understanding of a group, makes them provides a good springboard for them to go on, even whether that's independently or as a part of a partnership with a housing association. But really, I think Charles has touched on an important point. I would say in terms of long-term strategy, I think the easier and the less technical that we can make the process for community groups. Community groups have got all kinds of fantastic ideas and the right kinds of drives and so on. And they understand very well what's needed. But if you take the German example, in Germany, you do exactly what Charles is talking about. The local authority doesn't invite anybody in until they've actually got land. And then they invite people to form housing co-ops, and they provide them with a technical expert who makes everything happen. So the community provides the vision and focuses on creating community, which I think as a long-term goal, that's got to be something to aim for.
I think the other component that's worth noting for now is that the community housing sector is much more consolidated than it had been a couple of years ago, and there's much more experience, knowledge, live projects that are out there. There's no need for new groups coming in to do something like this thinking that they need to reinvent the wheel. If anything, a lot of the foundations for things are there. It's a really wonderful sector full of people that are interested in helping one another, and in particular Leeds Community Homes, like much of our purpose and what we do is to help particularly groups at that really early stage and help them navigate through what can be quite a technical and sort of challenging process. So very much like the enthusiasm to do it. And I think what Andy mentioned about strategy, like mapping community need and capacity to some realistic aims and outcomes is the really key bit. And then after that, it's there's lots of support that can be given to you to kind of steer you through that.
Well, I wonder, are there any more points that people would like to make or questions to ask? Or are we reaching a conclusion?
I've got one other suggestion for hubs. Sorry, hubs. The other one, it would seem to me, really the issue about which housing associations or other bodies are most likely to be attracted to it. I think the biggest ones are probably not the best. The best ones are medium to local size ones. It would be really good if hubs could almost do some advertising for lists of interested housing associations, because that's another service that hubs could provide to people who want to look at them.
Good one, Charles.
Yeah, that's something we're looking at, Charles, definitely.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Andy, about your proposal, and Jim, about your proposal that Leeds Community Hub should be an RP? How would you provide that service? Because most of the RPs that provide the facility in terms of to finance and take on the build of the housing. Is that something you're looking at, or is it actually you provide more of a consultancy service and let the CLT self-deliver the actual build side, and then you come in as the an operator or put an umbrella over the operation side? Is that the way you see it working?
One for Jim.
John, it could be either of those or any of those options. Yeah, we very much could provide a development service, but we don't yet have a big asset base that we can draw on. So we have similar constraints to what a group would have in terms of accessing finance. But what we do have is obviously the track record, the other schemes that we've got on the go, and then as we develop further, because we can de-risk. We can de-risk what's happening for groups and their development process. That the corollary of that is that we can benefit from the asset base that groups have who work with us, can then help other groups, because we can then borrow against all of it, if that makes sense. But
I
at
think
the same time,
the answer is that there's a variety of different ways that LCH could assist.
but the weakness we have is compared to an established housing association is that we don't have a massive borrowing capacity in excess of, based on other assets at the moment. So yeah, we are somewhat limited, but we hope that's going to change.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone 10 minutes over, so that's pretty respectable, isn't it? A sign of a proper session. So if